They said, "Just rest, Mom. We've got everything handled." I believed them. That was my first mistake. It was a Tuesday when my son came into the kitchen and set a box on the counter next to my coffee mug, a cardboard box, the kind people use when they're moving. He had that voice on, the patient one, the careful one, the voice he used when he thought I might not understand something the first time. "We just think it would be better," he said, "if you took the guest room. Patricia's mother needs more space. It's temporary." Patricia's mother, Carol. A woman I had met exactly 4 times. I looked at the box. I looked at my coffee. I looked at my son, whose name is Michael, who I had driven to every baseball practice for 6 years, who I had sat beside in an emergency room at 2 in the morning when he was 19 and thought he'd broken his wrist, who I had helped move into this very house when he and Patricia bought it 3 years ago, after he asked me to. After he said, "Mom, we'd love to have you here." "Temporary," I said. "Just until we sort things out with Carol's situation." He smiled. The kind of smile that ends a conversation. "You'll be more comfortable in there, honestly. The guest room has better light." I nodded. I picked up my coffee, and I walked out of the kitchen before he could see my face. "My name is Eleanor. I'm 68 years old. I was a middle school librarian for 26 years. I raised 2 children mostly alone after my husband Raymond passed. I have read more books than I can count, survived more hard seasons than I want to remember, and I have always known when I was being managed." This was the 3rd time in 4 months that something of mine had been quietly moved, adjusted, or rearranged to make room for Carol's comfort. First, my reading chair from the living room went to the basement. Then my shelf of books in the hallway got consolidated into a single basket. Now my bedroom. Each time, it was framed as something better for me. I spent that night in the guest room, lying on top of the bedspread in my clothes, looking at the ceiling. The room was fine. It had better light, technically. It also had a lock that didn't quite catch and a window that faced the neighbor's fence. But I wasn't thinking about the room. I was thinking about the box. It was still sitting on the counter in the kitchen. Michael had not asked if I needed help. He had not asked if I had feelings about any of it. He had simply placed the box and waited for me to fill it. I thought about Raymond. He used to say that the quietest moments were the ones that told you the most about a situation. "Listen to what's not being said," he'd tell me. Right now, what was not being said was, "We're sorry." What was not being said was, "This isn't permanent." What was not being said, what had not been said in months, was, "We're glad you're here." I got up at 6 the next morning before the house was awake. I made coffee in the kitchen. I washed my mug when I was done and put it in the back of the cabinet where it wouldn't be in anyone's way. Then I sat down at the small table near the window and I wrote a list. Not a packing list. Not a to-do list. A list of things I still wanted to do before I died. Number 1, live somewhere that felt like mine. I had a plan by noon, not a reckless one. I want to be clear about that. I am a librarian. I research before I act. I had savings, money Raymond left me, money I'd kept in a small account that existed before Michael knew my banking details. I had Social Security coming every month, direct deposit, to an account in my name only. I had a car that ran well. I had one daughter, Diane, who lived in Phoenix and called every Sunday and never once made me feel like a guest in her heart, even though I wasn't in her home. And I had a city in mind. Savannah, Georgia. I had visited once, years ago, for a librarians' conference. I remembered the moss on the trees. I remembered the way the light came through in the afternoon like something from an old painting. I remembered thinking, people actually live here. People wake up here and make coffee and walk along these squares and call this theirs. I'd never forgotten that feeling. I didn't tell Michael. I didn't tell Patricia. I didn't leave a note that morning. What I did was pack carefully. Only what was mine. Only what mattered. 3 changes of clothes. My medications in a small organizer. A photograph of Raymond and me at the coast. The one where we're both laughing at something just outside the frame. A paperback. I hadn't finished, and a small cedar box that had belonged to my mother, inside which I kept a handwritten recipe for her pecan pie and a few folded letters from people I loved. I put everything in my car while Michael was at work and Patricia was out with Carol. I left at 2 in the afternoon on a Wednesday. I turned my phone to silent before I reached the end of the street. Not off, just quiet. I wasn't hiding. I was leaving. There is a difference. I want to tell you what that drive felt like, because I think people imagine it must have been dramatic. Tears on the highway, trembling hands on the wheel, maybe some kind of crescendo. It wasn't. It was 8 hours of quiet, miles of pine trees, and then flat land, and then something greener. I stopped once for gas, and once for a sandwich, and once just to stand beside the car for a minute and breathe. The second time I stopped, a woman about my age was walking a small brown dog along the grassy strip beside the gas station. She waved at me for no reason at all. I waved back. That was the moment I cried. Not because I was sad, because it had been so long since a stranger had looked at me and offered something for nothing. I arrived in Savannah just after 10 that night. The air was warm and damp and smelled like earth and flowers I couldn't name. I had booked a room at a small motel near the historic district. Nothing fancy, just clean, $49 a night. I had looked it up that morning on my phone before anyone else was awake. The woman at the front desk had gray braids and reading glasses pushed up on her head. She handed me my key without ceremony and said, "Ice machines on the left. Breakfast is 7 to 9, and if you hear the cat in the hallway, his name is Bishop, and he doesn't bite unless you deserve it." I laughed out loud. It surprised me. I hadn't laughed like that in a while. Room 14 was small. A double bed, a wooden dresser, a lamp with a slightly crooked shade. The window looked out onto a courtyard with a magnolia tree that was doing exactly what it wanted with the space it had. I sat on the edge of the bed and looked at it for a long time. No one knew where I was. That felt enormous. Not frightening. Enormous. In the morning, I turned my phone back on. 14 missed calls. 7 texts. I read enough to understand the tone. Worry layered over frustration, Carol mentioned once, and then I put the phone face down on the dresser and went down for breakfast. The breakfast room had 4 small tables and a window box full of impatience. A man about my age with a white beard and reading glasses was working a crossword at the corner table. He looked up when I came in and nodded in the way that people do when they've decided you're worth acknowledging. "Coffee's fresh," he said. "The orange juice is from a carton, but they don't advertise that." "Thank you for the warning," I said. His name was George. He'd been staying at the motel for 2 weeks while looking for a short-term rental after selling his house in Virginia. His wife had passed 14 months ago. His kids were in Seattle and Tampa respectively and had both offered him rooms in their homes, and he had declined both offers politely and without regret. "I need to find out who I am when nobody's watching," he said, not dramatically, just plainly, the way you say something you've thought about for a long time. I understood that completely. After breakfast, I drove into the city. I parked near Forest Park and walked. The squares were everything I remembered, shaded, human-scaled, full of people reading and walking and sitting and simply being in a place without performing anything. I sat on a bench and watched a man sketch the fountain. I watched 2 women share a container of grapes. I watched a very small child explain something with great urgency to a pigeon that was not listening. I felt something loosen in my chest that I hadn't realized was tight. That afternoon, I found a corkboard in a coffee shop with handwritten notes pinned to it. Dog walkers, tutors, a guitar teacher, and 1 index card in careful block letters. Room for rent. Private, quiet. Shared kitchen. Responsible woman preferred. $475 sex month. Ask for Vera. I took a photo of the number. Vera answered on the second ring. Her voice was low and unhurried. She asked me 3 questions. "How long are you looking to stay? Do you cook fish in shared spaces?" She had an allergy, and "Are you a morning person or a night person?" "Morning," I said. "Good. Come see it at 4. The house was on a side street 3 blocks from a small grocery. White clapboard, dark green shutters, a front porch with 2 rocking chairs that looked like they'd been there since before either of us was born. Vera was 71, retired, a former nurse who had spent 30 years in pediatrics and had strong opinions about sleep schedules and weak opinions about everything else. She walked me through the house without narrating much. Let me see it. The room was upstairs. A full bed, a dresser, a small desk by the window that looked out over a backyard where a bird feeder hung from a low branch. The closet had more space than I needed. The bathroom down the hall was clean. "It's quiet here," Vera said from the doorway. "I don't pry. I don't hover. I cook Sunday dinners and I'll make a plate for you if you're around, but you don't have to be around." "I'll take it," I said. She handed me a key from her cardigan pocket like she'd been expecting this answer. I moved in that Friday with everything I'd packed into the car. Vera helped me carry in the lamp I bought at a thrift shop on my second day in Savannah. She didn't ask why I'd come with so little. She only said, "Some people arrive lighter than others. It's not a bad way to start." The first week, I learned the shape of the neighborhood. The bakery 2 blocks east that opened at 6:30 and always had something with rosemary in the window. The park at the end of Vera Street where older men played chess on weekend mornings. The library on Bull Street where I went on my 4th day in the city and spent 3 hours just standing among the shelves, breathing. The librarian on duty was young, maybe 25, with careful posture and ink stains on her fingers. She saw me lingering near the reference section and asked if I was looking for something. "Not exactly," I said. "I used to do your job." Her name was Priya. She lit up the way librarians do when they meet other librarians. A specific kind of recognition, like finding someone who speaks your first language in a foreign country. We talked for 20 minutes about cataloging systems and difficult patrons and the particular satisfaction of finding exactly the right book for exactly the right person. Before I left, she said, "We actually use volunteers here sometimes. If you're local." "I'm getting there," I said. That night, I sat on the edge of my bed and held my phone for a long time. I had let 6 days pass. Michael had left 2 more messages, one tight with anger, one slightly softer, both of them circling around the same unspoken thing. "How could you do this without warning us?" Not, "Are you okay?" Not, "We're sorry." Just, "How could you?" Patricia had not called at all. My daughter Diane had texted on day 2. "Mom, Michael said you left. Are you safe? You can tell me nothing else if you want. Just tell me that." I had replied with 3 words, "I am safe," and she had sent back a single heart and nothing more. That was Diane. She gave people room to be where they needed to be. There was also a text from my granddaughter, Sophie. Diane's youngest, 16, sharp as a tack and kinder than she knew. It said, "Grandma, I don't know what happened, but I know you, and I know it was something. I love you. Text me back when you're ready." I read it twice and tucked the phone under my pillow like something I wanted to keep close. I started volunteering at the library on my 2nd week, Tuesday and Thursday mornings, 4 hours each, shelving and helping with the children's reading program. There was a boy named Marcus who came every Tuesday with his grandmother and was working his way through every book about trains in the collection. There was a woman named Helen who was learning to read at 59 and who cried quietly after finishing her first full picture book. There was Priya, who brought me tea without asking and let me reorganize the poetry section because she said I looked at it like it had personally offended me. "It was organized by publication date," I told her. "That's not how people read poetry." "It is now by mood," she said, looking at what I'd done. "I like it." I was useful again. That sounds small. It wasn't. George from the motel had found a rental on the other side of the park. We had fallen into a habit. Saturday mornings at the bakery, 2 coffees, 1 scone each, crossword if he remembered to bring it. He never asked about my family, and I never asked about his grief. We talked about books and birds and what the city had been like before either of us arrived and what it might become. It was the most comfortable silence I had sat inside in years. One afternoon in my 3rd week, a letter arrived. Vera handed it to me at the kitchen table with her eyebrows slightly raised. The return address was Michael's house. I set it beside my coffee cup and looked at it. Vera refilled her cup and sat across from me. She did not ask. She was good at that. I opened it after she'd gone to the garden. Michael had written 4 pages. They were organized the way he organized everything, points and subpoints, feelings presented like an argument. He said I had caused the family significant stress. He said I had acted impulsively and without consideration. He said Patricia had been hurt, which I found notable given that Patricia had not contacted me once. He said Carol's situation was complicated and that my reaction had been. The word he chose was disproportionate. Disproportionate. I had spent 31 months living in their house. 31 months of cooking, cleaning, watching the children after school, being careful to take up the right amount of space and never more. 31 months of being useful and undemanding and cheerful about it. And when I was moved to a smaller room to make space for a woman I barely knew, and when my son handed me an empty box and waited, and when not once in the weeks that followed did anyone ask how I was doing, my leaving was disproportionate. I folded the letter carefully. I put it back in its envelope. That night, I called Diane. She answered on the first ring. Mom. Just my name, but with everything in it. I'm in Savannah, I said. A pause. Then, Savannah, Georgia. Not a question, just her placing it. Are you okay? Actually okay? I think I'm more okay than I've been in a couple of years. She exhaled. I heard her settle somewhere, a chair or a couch. Tell me. So I told her. Not everything, not the small accumulated weight of every moved chair and reorganized shelf, but the shape of it, the box on the counter, the guest room, the letter. She listened without interrupting, which was a skill she had always had and which I had never thanked her enough for. When I finished, she said, I want to be angry at Michael, but I'm more angry at myself for not seeing it sooner. You were in Phoenix. That's not good enough. A quiet moment. Can I come visit? Not to fix anything, just to see you. I'd like that very much. After we hung up, I opened the cedar box from my mother and took out the pecan pie recipe. I sat at Vera's kitchen table and read it the way you read something written by someone who loved you, slowly, for what it says between the lines. The next morning, I made the pie. Vera tasted it and said, This is obscene. Make another one. I called Sophie that evening. She answered immediately, whispering because she was apparently in a class she didn't want to be in. I told her I was fine, that I'd explain everything soon, that she was the first person besides her mother I'd wanted to talk to. I knew it, she whispered. I knew you were okay. You're always okay, Grandma. You're the most okay person I know. That might be the nicest thing anyone's ever said to me, I said. Don't tell Mom I said it. She'll want me to put it in a card. A pause. Are you somewhere good? I think I'm somewhere becoming good, I said, which might be better. I heard her smile through the phone. I didn't respond to Michael's letter. I thought about it for several days. The right words, the measured tone, all the things I could explain if I chose explanation. But the more I thought, the more I understood that the letter wasn't asking for explanation. It was asking for compliance. It wanted me to come back and slide back into the shape I'd been pressed into. I was not going back into that shape. What I did instead was call a woman I'd noticed at the library, a retired teacher named Frances who ran a small literacy group on Wednesday afternoons and who had mentioned offhandedly that she was always looking for volunteers with patience. I have a lot of patience, I told her when I called. And time. Thursday at 3, she said. Bring nothing. I'll tell you what I need when I see you. Michael sent a second letter 2 weeks later, shorter this time and different in tone. Less like an argument, more like someone who had started to understand that I was not coming back because he said the word disproportionate correctly. He said Carol's mother had found her own arrangement. He said the guest room was available. He said, and this was the first time in the entire correspondence, he said, I think I handled things badly. I sat with that for a long time. He wasn't asking for forgiveness exactly. He was doing what Michael had always done, conceding the minimum necessary point and waiting to see if that was enough. It wasn't, but it was something. It was a start. I wrote back, 1 page, no subpoints. I told him I was in Savannah. I told him I was well. I told him that what had happened was not about a room or a box or even Carol's arrival. It was about a pattern of years in which I had made myself small so no one would have to accommodate me, and that I had finally understood I could stop doing that. I told him I loved him because I did, because he was my son, because I had sat beside him in emergency rooms and driven him to baseball practice for 6 years. But I told him that love did not mean returning to a life in which I was arranged around other people's needs like furniture. I ended it simply. I'll call when I'm ready. I'm not ready yet, but I will be. That's already different from before. Diane came in November. She drove from Phoenix, 2 days, alone, said she needed the road time to think. She arrived on a Sunday afternoon with a bottle of wine, a bag of good coffee, and a plant for my room, a small jade plant in a terracotta pot. Something that doesn't need much fuss, she said. But it does need water. Don't forget to water it. Is that advice about the plant or about me? Both. Vera made pot roast. George came by for dessert because I had told him I was having my daughter visit, and he had shown up anyway with a box of pralines from a shop on Congress Street. The 4 of us sat at Vera's kitchen table until 10 o'clock. There was a lot of talking, and some of it was serious and most of it wasn't. At one point, Diane looked around the table and then at me, and something in her face shifted, softened and settled at the same time, the way a face does when it sees something it had hoped for but wasn't sure of. Later, after George had gone and Vera had gone to bed, Diane and I sat on the front porch in the dark with our wine, the street quiet and warm, the magnolia at the neighbor's fence doing its slow, patient thing. "You look different," she said. "Different how?" She thought about it. "Like yourself." She leaned her head slightly to the side. "I think you forgot what that looked like for a while." I almost forgot too. We stayed on the porch until the wine was gone and the air had cooled down into something almost crisp. There was a lot we didn't say that night, and that was fine. The shape of the evening said most of it. Before she left the next morning, Diane hugged me in the hallway for a long time. She was not a person who cried easily. She didn't cry then either, but she held on longer than usual, and when she pulled back, she kept her hands on my shoulders for a moment and looked at me the way you look at something. "You're glad is still here. Sophie wants to visit over spring break," she said. "If that's okay. Tell her she can stay as long as she wants," I said. "I'll teach her the pecan pie." Sophie was going to love Savannah. I know this because 3 weeks after Diane's visit, Sophie texted me a photograph of a library book she'd checked out. It was a travel guide to Georgia coastal towns. Underneath the photo she wrote, "Doing research. Being professional about this." I laughed until my eyes watered. There's a morning I think about now when I need to remind myself of something. It was an ordinary Tuesday. Not the day I left, not the day I arrived, not any day with a weight to it. I was walking to the library through the park, the same route I'd taken maybe 40 times by then. The light was doing its Savannah thing, coming sideways through the trees, warm and unhurried. A man on a bench was reading to a small girl who had fallen asleep against his arm before he finished. I slowed down. I didn't stop. I just slowed down and watched for a moment. And I thought, this is what it feels like to move at your own pace through a life that belongs to you. Not a grand life, not a dramatic one, just one where you are the one who decides. I have made mistakes in my life, real ones. I have been too quiet when I should have spoken and too patient when I should have drawn a line. I gave too much of myself to people who mistook my generosity for obligation, and I let them mistake it for too long because it was easier than the alternative. The alternative, it turned out, was this: magnolias and a borrowed kitchen and a bird feeder outside my window, a librarian who brings me tea, a retired nurse who doesn't pry. A man who respects a good silence. A daughter who drives 2 days to sit on a porch with a bottle of wine. A granddaughter doing research. And somewhere down a road I haven't finished walking yet. The rest of it. I am 68 years old. I know things now I wish I'd known at 30. I know that waiting for someone to tell you you're allowed to take up space is a long and losing game. I know that quiet endurance is not the same as strength, even when it looks like it from the outside. I know that the people who love you right will find you wherever you are. I know that it's not too late. I am proof of that. If you're sitting somewhere right now, feeling like furniture, feeling rearranged and accommodated around and managed, I want you to hear this. The box on the counter is not an ending. It's an inventory. It's the moment you find out what you actually need, which is almost never as much as you thought, and almost always simpler. Take the cedar box. Take the photograph. Take whatever Raymond gave you for your anniversary, whatever it is you've been carrying for the right reason, and go somewhere real. If this story found you at the right moment, please share it. Leave a comment and let me know. I'll be here. And I am finally glad to be somewhere that means something.